What's going on, everybody? Welcome into Bills Chat Live. It is the playoff edition, Super Wildcard edition. I am Josh McCarty. With me tonight to get ready for this Bills Jaguars matchup on Sunday is Luka. Luka, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm glad big boy football is finally here. We're finally in the games that matter. We're in the fun ones. The one win or go home. The games feel different. The Bills losses hurt more. The wins feel even better. Yeah, I mean everything about that. And let's not forget that the original MVP, as the Buffalo Bills put out themselves, is returning to the playoffs once again, as Mitch Trubisky will be sitting on the bench for the Bills in this super wild card weekend. Although I think I feel like the NFL officially got rid of the super part of that and they just call it wild card weekend, or maybe they reduced the super part. Let's bring back the big super because it's awesome, especially now that you get college football playoff, might I add, on
Yeah.
Thursday, Friday. So it's a huge football weekend for anyone that just enjoys the sport. Yeah, it's a good time to be sitting here on a Wednesday night to go live and talk some Bills playoff football.
It's a great stretch of days for football, Thursday through Monday. And there is a Monday night game for those that aren't aware. East Melise is in chat. Always love when she's hanging out. Let us know how you're feeling about this game. Luka, I know I tend to be the one who's more in tune with what's going on Twitter. You're more of the, have the conversations in the group texts and all that stuff. But I'm feeling a lot of uneasiness among Bills fans this week. And it almost feels like pending doom, as the tone of the conversations I'm seeing is, if they lose, which heads roll? Is it McDermott? Is it Bean? I mean, do they get both out of here? Do who on the roster? You guys know the conversations. I find that to be a little bit interesting. Um, I guess two-part question. Have you noticed that same tone? And then where is your head at with this matchup here, sitting here on Wednesday evening?
Um, I am not uneasy, or at least as uneasy as the general public feels about this game. I would say that you hear a lot of different narrative stats, whatever it is being put out there in the space, and somewhat rightfully so, but also it feels a little strange being that the Bills are a 6 seed. The main point of topic and conversation for the Bills going into this has to be the year. This has to be the time that Josh Allen goes out there and finally makes his Super Bowl run. And it's one that you at least have some other cooler heads, maybe still bringing up that point, like you would like to see Josh Allen still make this run due to those normal hurdles that he hasn't been able to get over, no longer in the tournament in front of him. But also there are 10 other people on the field while he's out there and 11 others that are out there when he's not out there, being the defense, that still have to do their jobs. And the outcome will dictate to how all of those individuals as a collective unit play through 60 minutes each week, if they were to be lucky enough to advance. So I don't know. I think it's strange where this is. And then, you're even seeing things where I think one of the funniest things I saw today when it comes to the narratives, because I think that's kind of where we're jumping off here, is on McAfee show, avid watcher, of course, I think it's well documented at this point. AQ Shipley did something that was hilarious, and he's done it multiple years now, where this was where he called out his top 5 offensive lines of the season. The Bills were his number 1 offensive line of the season. And then all of a sudden, in turn, in the wild card weekend, he chose the Jags. He picked the Jags to win that game. And last year, he said the Eagles were the best offensive line going into the postseason, and he actually picked the Eagles to lose the wild card weekend themselves. Or maybe were they the 1 seed? No, I don't think. Maybe they were. Anyways, he picked against them their first moment he could, and it's like, isn't the offensive line in his eyes supposed to dictate the outcome? So it's one of those things where we'll get into it further. That I think the chaos of all these different things being thrown out there are just creating and allowing these uneasy feelings of Bills fans to be there, and uncertainty as to what they should feel going into this game. And I will say that I find myself to be in that cooler headed area where I still believe that the two things that matter going into a playoff run well, there's three things because defense matters and we'll get into that, but two things that do matter and help dictate outcomes are the trenches when it comes to your offensive line and the quarterback. Those two things a lot of times can result in positive outcomes, and the Bills, for all intents and purposes, are going to go up against teams where they will check both those boxes and have the advantage of both time or all the times if they were to keep going even past this Jacksonville game. That I honestly I feel pretty good that, going into this matchup, I think they match up decently with the Jags, all things considered. And then on top of it, I think this point you even brought up here, this does feel like two titans of this playoffs in the AFC side, that the path for the Bills, if they were to get through this game, feels a lot more manageable all of a sudden once you get to the divisional and then hopefully AFC championship. So I'm feeling, all things considered, pretty damn good.
Caleb checking in, our favorite Chiefs fan. He always checks in during these games. We love seeing you here, Caleb. He says that this is his AFC championship game. I've seen a lot of people say that. I saw Russ Tucker say that earlier, and I get it. You have the Josh Allen team and you have the Jaguars, who many think are the most balanced team in the AFC. I want to go back to Dominic's point here that the Jags getting Myers so cheap and Bean sitting on his hands. I want to get into that in a little bit, Luka, because I think Dominic brings up a great point of why, should the Bills lose this game, this might actually be the worst opponent to lose to, because they are an example of what the Bills should have done at the deadline, and an example of, the positive impact that changes can have on your roster. But I just tweeted this out from our account. I've been going back and forth on this game really since I knew the Jaguars were the opponent. I did want the Jaguars over the Patriots. I did not want to deal with the 5 seed in the Ravens. So in that regard, the matchup I wanted is the one we got. And I've been diving into more Jag stuff, been looking at all the numbers, all the film, anything you want to say, I've been diving into this week. This is a very good team. This is not a layup by any means. The Bills are a 1-point favorite, which tells you that Vegas doesn't even really know. They're just trying to set the line in a way that 50% of the money comes in one way, 50% comes in on the other way. We will get into a little bit later what so far we can tell you about the way the money's going and which way like the smart, sharp bettors are going. But I think right before we got on the air, I finally landed on a spot that I'm not going to move off of, Luka. And this is where I'm at. The Bills have to win this game. Will they win this game? I don't know. Jaguars are a good team. This is a 1-point spread. I think by kickoff, I might even predict the Jaguars, or it's a pick 'em, or even public money has it bumped up to Jaguars being a little bit of a favorite. But the Bills have to win this game. You are now with a 30-year-old Josh Allen. Sean McDermott has been here since 2017. You have the longest active playoff streak in the NFL. And I know injuries have been the story of this team, but let's really peel back the layers and talk about who's gone. And it really comes down to Ed Oliver. And he might be coming back, and that's a significant loss. That's your best defensive tackle. And a lot of fans are going to scream, Max Harrison got hurt in the Week 18 game, and that's true. Jacksonville lost Travis Hunter. He's not playing. He was the second pick in the draft, and they sold the farm to get him. So if we want to call that even, I think Jaguars fans would scream about that. But let's just go ahead and say that Jacksonville's dealing with injuries too. But this really has less to do about the players on either side that we're going to get into, the matchups, the players that we like in Jacksonville, and why we think Jacksonville could give the Bills trouble. And this is more about where the teams are at. This is a first-year head coach. This is a first year of this group of Jaguars with this coach being in the playoffs. I know Trevor Lawrence has made the playoffs before. He's 1-1, has that great comeback against Herbert, but you're the Buffalo Bills. You have Josh Allen. And I know there's all these narratives out there that are exhausting. Luka touched on the one that if he doesn't get it done this year, boy, the pressure is going to come on him. The other one out there is, boy, Josh Allen is just carrying this team of mediocre players. And then the other one is, if Sean McDermott doesn't win the Super Bowl this year, you should fire him. And you start adding up all those narratives. They don't really fit together because one kind of takes away at the other. But where I finally land at is, you can't in 2025 have your season end in the wild card round against the Jacksonville Jaguars. And it very well could. But everything that went into this season, the way that Bean ranted on WGR, the resources this team pumped into the defense this offseason, the fact that the Chiefs The Ravens and the Bengals are out of the way. And let's just dismiss the quarterback portion of that and talk about the fact that the Chiefs have been in the Bills' way, not just Mahomes, but the Chiefs. If all of that adds up to a season where at the outset it looked like the number one seed was in your grips and you let it slip away, and now you get a sixth seed, if you end up letting that go and falling to the Jacksonville Jaguars in round one, absent the Jaguars going on some miraculous run where they blow out everybody else along the way and just look like they're clearly the best team in football on way to the Super Bowl, this is going to be the season, even more so than 13 seconds, that we will look back on and say, that was an opportunity that is unacceptable to let slip away.
It's a very valid, I'll call it level-minded approach to what truly lays on the edge of a coin when it comes to this matchup. I think everything you said is valid in the sense of this has to be a win for the Bills in the context of where they are as a franchise with Josh Allen, with Sean McDermott, everything that's been leading up to this. This has to be a win on paper. But at the end of the day, you look at this matchup and it's like the Jags all around are a very solid team. So it's not unreasonable to sit here in a vacuum and go, Bills against Jags, the outcome is truly a 50-50. I mean, the betting line shows that, the way the bets are even going is showing that for what it's worth. I believe right now it currently is like 52% money line on the Bills, but then also 54 or 55% last I checked was on Jags plus 1.5. When you see that kind of public split, but that tight at the same time, that tells you that quite literally no one has any idea what the heck is going to happen in this game. That is true. And it's funny to sit there and you have Josh Allen on one side and Trevor Lawrence, who up until this season was kind of like, was he really even worthy the first overall? In his draft, he was the clear bona fide number one pick for what it's worth. I'm just going to put that on record, but he has elevated himself to the point to being the guy that this offense needs, that Liam Cohen needs, which also for the matter of Liam Cohen coming in first year, early on, you were seeing what it looked like, Liam Cohen and Trevor Lawrence butting heads a little bit. And then they figured it out. And maybe the secret sauce was bringing in somehow Jacoby Myers. And if you look at their offensive production, all of a sudden when Jacoby Myers came in, he has been a godsend for them, as well as the rise of Parker Washington, that it's, they've been doing great over there. And then their defense is just, for the most part, all around solid. So it's not crazy for the Bills to lose this game just simply for the game itself, but the greater meaning of what it could feel like afterwards if they were to lose is what makes the pressure be there. But at the same time, I will say this: the Bills are a 6 seed for a reason. The Bills are sitting in their current position for a reason. They lost by double digits to Miami. They lost at home to the Patriots. They looked miserable for the most part in Houston up against that great defense as we know it now. But it's you lost the games that put you in this position because you just were never able to be consistent enough. And once you get to the playoffs, the one thing you need is consistency. You need the two-sided consistency of a football team to put together results. And that's the thing. And that's the reason you see the lines. It's the reason we have uncertainty about it, that it's like, is this team even capable of that? If we see the Bills come out and actually put on a great performance against this Jaguars team, I am almost certain you will hear an absolute narrative flip from everyone out there from the outside looking in on, okay, this team's going to make a run. This team is capable of making a run. And you're not going to hear all of a sudden this huge negative vibe around the team. But that's that's less about the game itself. And it's more about just the overall image that the Bills and position that the Bills are in. And basically what everyone, which I'm sure Josh Allen, Sean McDermott, those players, the front office, everyone understands what the opportunity is, even in-house, without all of those big boys, we'll call them, in the tournament. Like, you are the big boy. There's the big four, and you're the only one with one represented in this tournament right now. That's the opportunity you have in front of you. And now the only thing standing in your way as of right now is the Jaguars. Like the irony of it all too is I believe Liam Cohen at one point says, let's see if this small market team can make a run. And the irony of it is the Jags are a bigger market than the Bills, whether you want to believe it or not. That is the true reality. So you have two small market teams living two completely different lives with different levels of expectations that I have this weird confidence because I still just believe in experience when it comes to games. But you can absolutely understand, though, at the same time, where you're coming from, where a lot of people are coming from, and saying how important and how much of a must-win game this is, just for the sake of where do we go from here once the season ends, whenever that is. Because if it were to end after this week, for instance, that will be a massive forest fire fueling the local media and even national media for the entirety of the offseason.
We have some great points being brought up in chat. Dominic, I want to talk about this in a bit. The most flawed team in the last 5 years. I love Roy Collins' point about the Jaguars held Taylor to under 100 rushing yards in both games, under 75, truly, and no running back got over 75 against them. I think it's the third time since 2002 that's happened. So we can talk about some of those numbers. But I want to talk about one more thing, Luka. And so the Bills have made it to the second round of the playoffs basically every year since 2020. That's the longest active streak in the NFL. They also have the longest active playoff streak. So if they were to lose this weekend, that would be an outlier in their history. The only time they didn't make it to the second round in Josh Allen's era was his very first playoff start, which was a circus. Um, we know how the first round has gone for the Bills. They have been, there's been some interesting. The Colts game was very intense, but for the most part, these first round games have almost been like, all right, let's get through this healthy as can be, and let's not lose. And oh man, we lost Benford in the first round. Now we're screwed. It hasn't even been about beating the opponent. It's been Mason Rudolph and the Steelers, Skylar Thompson and the Dolphins. The game was close on the scoreboard, but holy cow! Like, look at the box score. The better team was very clear. Bo Nix last year was a pup, and it showed. The Bills blew the Broncos off the field. These first round matchups, the Patriots game, the perfect game, was a blowout. Mac Jones was a pup. I wonder, Luka, hypothetical situation. Let's say the Bills win that first Patriots game. Everything else is the same in the NFL, except somehow, some way, some other team in the AFC South has more wins than the Jaguars. The Bills are sitting here with their same record. I guess one more win. The Jaguars are sitting here with their same record, but the game's in Buffalo. Are people nearly as nervous this week? Is this a geography thing, or is this an X's and O's thing?
I mean, geography in the sense of who's home and who's hosting. Yes. Yeah. Like, I would say, like, you could even in a vacuum, let's just say Bills are home, but it's a nice sunny day. Not that it would ever be in the playoffs, just because Buffalo's Buffalo. But yeah, the who is hosting this game is absolutely playing a role in that, because I think it's both who's hosting it, but then on top of it, just the outlook of what the Bills have in front of them. Like the classic thing that's being tossed out there, because it's a broad stat that is readily apparent to anyone who even half listens to any sports radio or watches any sports content, is, the Bills haven't won a road playoff game since 92 when they won the AFC Championship in Miami. That is an alarming stat just because of how long it's been since. But when you really kind of peek under the hood of that, how many opportunities have really been there? One, there was a 17-year playoff drought in between that entire thing. You don't exactly have opportunities to get a win on the road if you don't ever get into the playoffs in the first place. And then two, the Bills have always been in a good position, or good enough position, to be hosting playoff games, a plentiful of playoff games in that stretch. So where they have made it, let me just make sure I say that still. That it's like, yes, is it bad that they haven't won a road playoff game since 92? Sure, because when you think about it, they lost in Arrowhead last year. They lost in Arrowhead in 2020. They've come up short in Houston due to, as Josh described it, a circus of a game.
The quarterback showed his inexperience. It was his first playoff game, and by the end of it, he was showing it.
Yeah, there were, you had Tyrod Taylor and the Bills going to Jacksonville against Blake Bortles and that Jags team, who it turned out was 10 minutes away from making a Super Bowl themselves. So there is just there's a second layer to something like that it's like, I would like to believe that a lot of these Bills teams of recent years past could have won a road playoff game if they needed to. The road playoff games they lost just so happened to be against Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, Travis Kelce, and the Chiefs in Arrowhead. Like, no one goes to Arrowhead very often and wins a playoff game. In the history of the NFL, that is a big feat to do so.
Especially in the Andy Reid Mahomes era, there's been two quarterbacks that got it done: Tom Brady and Mahomes' first playoff run, and then Burrow. And really, say what you want to about Burrow, that was a Bengals defensive game that won the game.
Yeah. So even when you say that, but it's just one of those things where I think the stat needs a little bit more narrative to then. I think if you understand where it comes from, that it's less shocking that it's like, oh my God, the Bills can't win a playoff game on the road. They haven't won a road playoff game, Josh, since I was born. And it's like, well, I mean, there was a long stretch there where the Bills weren't in the playoffs while I was alive. So it's just context matters with all of those things. And I think as you're putting it to round it back up and kick it back over, yes, if the Bills were hosting the Jags, I think the narrative would be completely different. And it would more so be in the light of positivity, where it's like, all right, the Bills have inexperienced Trevor Lawrence and first-year coach Liam Cohen coming to Orchard Park. Gonna be a tough matchup for those Jags to try to get through that, as they don't have the experience and they're staring across the field of Josh Allen and Sean McDermott, two of the most winningest playoff performers of recent history. And that would be the narrative of this game. It's like, you have to now come to Buffalo. It's like, no, because it's flipped. And, the Jags have been the hottest team in football, basically, them and the Houston Texans. And from there, you got to go to Jacksonville to get that win. I think that just adds to the pressure that makes it enough to just fuel the flames a little bit of, we'll call it media entertainment and storylines, that it can add pressure that feels a little bit unnecessary and unjust, although still valid, because it's like the Bills are a 60. They have to go on the road. And it's like, how the hell did the Bills with Josh Allen find themselves in this situation in the first place?
Yeah. And it is a streak they have to get off their back if they want to do anything this year. There is no rule that says you have to play a road playoff game, but there is a rule that says the Bills have to probably play 3 this year. So I just wanted to get those couple thoughts out there. And again, it has nothing to do with the quality of the opponent. The Jaguars are a very good team. I'm just saying about where the Bills are at, what this season was supposed to be. It's going to be a tougher pill to swallow than any Chiefs loss. I mean, obviously, we don't know how the game's going to end. There's always something we've never seen before that could make us talk about something totally different than we expected. But I have a hard time believing that a loss on Sunday will bring anything other than the most dramatic offseason, at least from a conversation standpoint, we've had in the Josh Allen era. All right, let's get to some of these questions in chat. Dominic says those were home games. Going to Jacksonville is a whole different animal. Plus, their kicker can kick from 70. We're not sure who our kicker is. Boy, if it comes down to kickers, Dominic, you are spot on, because Cam Little is maybe the best kicker in the sport. And it does sound like today, and much to my surprise, that Matt Prater has a real shot to kick in this game. And he did not kick in practice today, but he said he's going to kick tomorrow. He's optimistic he can play. Luka, let's spend a couple minutes on this because I know people are concerned. The Bills did sign Matthew Wright to their practice squad, so they have some options. Now, let's talk about the logistics of it. On Saturday at 4 p.m., NFL teams have to announce who they've elevated from their practice squad. So the teams can elevate up to 2 people. A key roster move was made today. The Bills put Jordan Phillips on IR, and they already assigned Dane Jackson to their active roster, so he doesn't have to be elevated. He was going to have to be with the Maxwell Harrison injury. What I predict the Bills will do is, regardless of what Prater looks like, Friday, Saturday, they are going to elevate Matthew Wright. Now, there is a difference between elevate and activate. You can elevate a player and still make him a game day inactive. You're elevating him to your 53. You can still inactive him and not make him one of your 48. It's weird. It doesn't happen a lot because generally teams burn these elevations for strategic reasons that they have planned out for this player. But this is a very unique case. And what the Bills don't want to have happen, Luka, is Saturday they feel great about Matt Prater, so they don't elevate Matthew Wright. Once you decide not to, it doesn't matter what happens to Prater the next 24 hours. Matthew Wright is not an option for you. You can't elevate him beyond that. If Matthew Prater goes out and hurts himself during warmups, and Matthew Wright being elevated buys you up until 90 minutes before the game starts. I think it's well within the world of possibilities that the Bills elevate Matthew Wright and then make him inactive after giving Prater a very strong workout pregame. And I don't think it's likely, though, I've seen this float around on Twitter, that the Bills actually activate 2 kickers for the game. To me, that's just a bridge too far.
It's a waste of a roster spot that just feels too valuable for what you need going into a playoff game, especially when you have a lot of key guys that you utilize for multiple facets, right? Whether they're utility defenders, whether they're special teams players that also play a little bit of a role on defense and or offense. It's just one of those things where rostering 2 kickers on, during the game itself up to the 90 minutes before and even past it, it doesn't make sense. Now, up to the 90 minutes before, as you mentioned, makes a lot more sense. The weird thing too is perfect band. The weird thing too is that I feel like kickers are one of the few, at least, although you'll see, positional players and stuff come out a little bit early if they're trying to test their ankle, test their arm, whatever it is. But it's not a normal thing to do. And some guys are just such creatures of habit that they won't warm up until 90 minutes before, maybe 2 hours before, whatever it is, whatever that habit is for them. Kickers and special teams players go out there well early on to test themselves, warm up, do what they got to do. They get out there before anyone else to do their thing. And so I think that point is even more than valid. It's just that would be the smart and responsible thing to do. You're already dealing with someone that re-aggravated something. He's at the age that he is. I won't say the number because it's disrespectful to the man. And you want to be absolute certain as close to kickoff as possible that he will be able to go 60 minutes. And you would like to believe that he's been around for so long and understands the importance of him himself to what the team is and the outcome of a game, as important as this is, that if McDermott or whoever that's trusted to go up to him and go, how are you feeling? How's the leg? How's everything going on? That Prater would be looking at it as in the context of, can I confidently say I'm going to get through 60 minutes of football in the job that I have to do? And that's kickoffs, that's PATs, that's field goal opportunities. There are multiple things you have to be capable of doing. And for what it's worth, I bring up kickoffs too, because it's not simply just kicking the ball. I mean, the modern kickoff now, kickers have to be depended on potentially to run down the field, run down a returner. Anything's possible. You have to be at a physical level that, you're seeing funny clips like Groupie, who was kicking for the Colts week 18, get bounced off of Noel, who's returning it because he's, 5'7", 150 pounds or whatever it is. That it's like, hey, respect that you went for it. I don't need to see Prater going at it, especially if he's on a bad leg right now. It's like, that's not what we need. So if he's not up for it, up until that point, you have Matt Wright, as you said, sitting there ready to go. Come on now.
Appreciate you, Roy. He's younger than me.
Yeah, sitting there ready to go. And just like, you need a dependable kicker to get through the entirety of the game. You have to be healthy enough to do all the jobs asked of and get through a game and at least feel confident you will. Obviously, freak things can happen. That is the nature of the sport. But if you believe, just doing your job could even potentially tweak something, whatever it is, you are not capable of doing it and you need to be inactive because of it. So, I fully expect to see Wright elevated on Saturday. And then from there, it will be kind of looking at actives and inactives while we're watching pregame and whatnot. scrolling on Twitter and seeing if, they truly are going to go with Prater still, and we'll see Wright inactive, or the reverse, where we'll see Wright active and then Prater inactive. You're not doing both. That just feels irresponsible to a roster management standpoint.
And the Bills do have flexibility because they still have Kaliki Latu on their active roster. And if by Saturday, like I'm trying to think of an example here. Here, Joshua Palmer popped up on the injury report today. I know, surprise, surprise, Joshua Palmer's out again. If the Bills were to look at their situation and say, hey, Keon Coleman's wide receiver 5, but we actually would feel better about Mecole Hardman in this spot, and they need somebody else to elevate, they could actually release Latu and just sign Hardman to the active roster officially, and that way you don't have to do one of those elevations. There are tricks around it, and the Bills can certainly figure that out. All right, Luka, I want to talk about a question that Dominic had earlier, and I do want Dominic's had a couple ones. I want to talk about the Myers thing too, but the most flawed team in the last 5 years, and I keep hearing that, and I think early in the season I would have believed it. And I've really sat on that one, and I'm not trying to be a contrarian, but there's a part of me, and I'm guilty of it too. I look at a team like the Bengals, and I'm like, man, they're so loaded to underachieve every year. Burrow, Higgins, Chase. And, it's the same way I used to always look at the Detroit Lions when they couldn't figure out quarterback, but man, they had Calvin Johnson or Roy Williams and, all these great receivers. And I think it's because, and I'm not trying to dumb it down or condescend to anybody, it's because those are the star players in fantasy sports that move the meter. Jamar Chase is a star in this league. He gets Nike ads. I don't know if it's actually Nike, but he's on commercials. Justin Jefferson's on commercials. Spencer Brown might do like a local Buffalo car dealership commercial, but nobody at Nike's putting Spencer Brown as the face of their commercial. I don't view this Bills team as undermanned as most. I just don't think that they're where we want them to be at the sexy positions. And Luka and I, once we get to the offseason, hopefully more than a month from now, will be absolutely leading the train of get a wide receiver, maybe 2, maybe 3. But not having good wide receivers, having arguably the worst wide receiver group in the entire sport, does not equate to having a bad roster around Josh Allen. I thought Dan Orlovsky hit this pretty well. There's a lot of people out there. AQ Shipley, Bills have the best offensive line left in the playoffs. Okay. Dan Orlovsky said, when healthy, but Kincaid's healthy, the Bills have a top 3, top 5 tight end room in the league. Who wants to argue that after what we saw from Knox, what we saw from Hawes and Kincaid when he's healthy? But they have the running back that just won the rushing title, and they have the quarterback who won the MVP last year. Okay, so that's offense. Defense, you can fudge the stats all you want to. You can make jokes about nobody threw on them because they could run on them. They had the number 1 pass defense in the sport. And I know early on in the season, it felt like they couldn't stop a nosebleed. I equate some of that to guys playing that had no business being on the field because they weren't healthy. Taylor Rapp and Terrell Bernard. Those 2 players were not even a shell of themselves out there. And once they got off the field, and Shaq Thompson or even Dorian Williams, quite honestly, and then Jordan Poyer came on, stabilized things. So I think this Bills defense is better than the defense last year. You have Cole Bishop at safety that was in the running for the Pro Bowl. Christian Benford, since about halfway through the season, when Taylor Rapp came out, by the way, has been playing as high of a level as any cornerback in the sport. And while I spent the first 2 months of the season ranting and making fun of Tre'Davious White, he has been a very solid starting quarterback, better than what the Bills got out of Rasul Douglas last year. And I don't think it's particularly close. And boy, oh boy, would I have laughed at you in the face if you told me I'd be saying that in January. And they have Max Harrison, not for this game, but in general, who has been maybe I shouldn't even mention that because he's not going to be there for that game, and that'll be the part people focus on. But they didn't have Joey Bosa last year opposite Greg Rousseau. It was a washed-up Von Miller. So I just look at it. I think this defense, since about the early November, has at least gotten to middle of the pack. And this offense, no matter what chart you want to look at, it's not sexy. It's not 400 yards passing every week. It's not 5 touchdowns passing every week, but they still rank in the upper right quadrant of any chart you want offensively, is as good as it gets in the sport. And I start looking at it and I'm like, why do we have to keep saying this team is so undermanned? I think the Bills are probably playing those things on a loop in the locker room, like Josh Allen and a bunch of bums. I don't think this team's as undermanned as people like to say it is. Do they lack high-end superstar talent that, a random 10-year-old kid's gonna walk down the street and say, like, San Antonio, Texas with a Spencer Brown jersey on? Maybe. But do they lack, like, the talent that Luka talked about, winning in the trenches, winning on game day, defending the pass? I don't think that they're as flawed as we've maybe made them out to be.
I don't know why Spencer Brown's taking so many shots from you tonight.
Spencer
No.
Brown is great.
And by the way, Spencer Brown's a guy who's definitely known, at least in the media circuits and stuff. And you go, well, at least they got that mean son of a bitch at right tackle. Everyone knows who Spencer Brown is. That knows ball, understands it, watches tape, whatever. It's like, you highlight 79. Just trying to give a little bit of props to a guy who's taken some not
Well,
intentional shots, but I'm just laughing.
there's no 10-year-old with a Trent Williams jersey on. You name it. The Quentin Nelson.
One of the potential best left tackles of all time. No one's wearing that.
Nobody wears his jersey. Saquon Barkley, Devon A-Chain, those jerseys are in every single state.
Yeah. No, I'm just poking fun at
But
you.
I get what you're saying.
Picking on Spencer Brown. Regardless, digress. I love this rant, and I'm not going to go crazy because I think you basically hit everything, and it would, for the most part, be redundant. But I think the preconception of the Bills lacking mightily with this roster going into this is something that it's almost like a point that people have held on to going into November. They just, that was a notion they made once they got to, through October into November, and they're like, that is what this team is going forward. And I would even say I was a little guilty of it, in a sense of, I would just be like, you got to accept them for what they are. You got to accept them for what they are, and things like that. When the reality of it is, you highlighted a lot of great points where stability came defensively, and the numbers absolutely back it up, especially in the second half of the season, where it's like, this defense is not nearly as bad as you think it is. It's just, the problem is when they get gashed on a little bit more of a regular occurrence, it's so highlighted by the fact of these terrible performances that came prior. Obviously everyone points at, for instance, the Atlanta Monday night game. Like, that one is going to be one of the marquee games remembered of this season, regardless of the end of it all, just because of what transpired in that first half. I feel like, that's going to be one of the highlights, highlights or highlighted moments of this season, that it is what it is. The Houston game will be another. There's enough losing end moments on this season where it became so frustrating that I think it solidified, it put it in concrete in everyone's minds that this team is just clearly not as good as it used to be. But, you bring up last year's team. When you look at this defense compared to the one that went into Kansas City for the AFC Championship last year, I can confidently sit here and say that I would take a lot of these guys in their current form, put them on there, and feel confident that they win that game. You bring up Bosa, you bring up Cole Bishop in this form, you bring up, Benford, if he could have just played out that game, aka if he can just make a run and stay healthy this year, you take that, of course. Trey White, yes, he was a meme the first 2 months, but again, you showing the props, it's like, no, he showed up later half of this season in positive ways. And you're like, okay, look, does he have the top end speed, recovery speed? No, he didn't really have that to begin with, even as an all pro, let's be honest. But he's still that vet. He's trusting who he is physically now at this point, and he is actually excelling. Poyer has been a godsend, thanks, because, Rap, as you pointed out, was just a shell. The defensive side of things, I think, is why people believe that. But when you truly look at it all, as you mentioned, when you have individuals like Bernard, Rapp, who are trying to play through numerous injuries and respect it for what it is, but also like, hey, you are a detriment to this team and the defense and what they're trying to do. It's as clear as day. You need to shut it down. All of a sudden, you bring in capable bodies behind them. The results show themselves. You are getting effective play from them. And especially when then you combine that with the abilities of the coaching staff in place, who are so good at adjusting on the fly and during games. And it's well documented, of course, at halftime, especially how good they are at flipping the script and turning things around. You just need 11 effective players with a couple key guys there to do their jobs. and then you're going to get it done. And Bosa, Rousseau, I mean, this version of Rousseau quietly has been a lot more consistent than what we've seen in years past as well, that it's deserved to be said. It's like, that's great. The cherry on top of it all, and why this point is fantastic, is yes, tight end, tackle, inside, running back, and quarterback. It's the best they've had going into a playoffs, bar none. Like, there is not even a debate. You have the same five who are as good as they've ever been. Outside of Deion, I would say Deion's taken a half step back, but he's still a very effective left tackle in his own right. He was obviously just a much better player, it feels like, and he's maybe finally starting to round that turn in his career arc. It's fine. You then have the tight end room, which is absolutely the most effective two-way tight end room you've ever had. Jackson Hawes is kind of the core reason for that, an absolute dime of a draft pick on day 3 that has allowed them to just be absolute monsters. And for what it's worth as well, in that same moment where people are highlighting the offensive line, a guy who gets a shout out, you heard his name getting chanted, kind of, it feels like, a little jokingly, but also seriously. Reggie Gilliam has been great when it comes to effective blocking and allowing James Cook to do what he is doing as he keeps ascending as a star in this league and recognized as one of the best running backs in this league. He was obviously, as you pointed out earlier in the show, the league leader. Everyone knows that in rushing. This is a team that is more capable than ever to control a game. That is something it feels like McDermott has been craving since day one. He now has the roster that it's like, hey, I have the best chance possible that I've ever had in my career as a head coach of the Bills to control a football game. But everyone just wants to look at the receivers, which are an absolute problem, of course. You want to look at early results of the defense and just getting gashed left and right against some, we'll call them lesser teams, because that's what they were. But you truly take it all for what it is. You look at it thoroughly. You can understand that this is not even close to how poor of a roster people want to make it out to be. And I think that's just because of the moments and the things that stick in your head don't have the context of it all attached to it. And it just becomes a little bit overbearing.
East Malise has a great point. Josh Allen talked to the media today after practice and was talking about what he did, I guess last week, when he kind of knew he wasn't going to play. I said there was a lot of self-scouting going on, and said he left a lot of meat on the bone. And that's where I want to get into this Jaguars matchup, because there's a guy on Twitter, the Coach A, Cody Alexander, and he wrote a fantastic article. It's free out there. I mean, it's behind a Substack, but you get one article for free. You can make that the one you get. I highly recommend it. Such a thorough breakdown of the Jaguars defense and the schemes they use, the personnel they use. But to East Malise's point, and to what Josh Allen was saying, the Jaguars run as many simulated blitzes as anybody in the sport. And they do a lot of 4-man pressures that look like 5-man blitzes. And it basically makes you think pressure's coming when it's not. A lot of post-snap diagnosis is needed. So we've seen this year, maybe a little more often than we're used to, offensive line confusion post-snap for the Bills. Free rushers coming at Josh Allen. Situations where Josh Allen doesn't make the right read pre-snap. But I think, particularly in a game like this, that block oddity. There we go. Block oddity. There we go. Welcome to the chat. Go Bills. I think one sign I'm looking for very early in this game, going back to East Malise's point, is Josh Allen taking his checkdowns. Because I always feel like I can tell when Josh is locked in, when he drops back, scans the field real quick, and then dumps it right to James Cook over the middle, and Cook just dives forward, gets 8 yards, and they're right back in the huddle. I'm like, all right, he's seeing the field today. If Josh Allen goes back and winds up and throws a ball, I don't care if it hits Brandon Cooks' hands and it goes down, or even if he catches it. If the first ball is deep and it's not like a wide open design play, and Josh Allen throws it into coverage he shouldn't have even really been challenging, even if it's complete, I'm going to be like, oh boy, we might be getting the YOLO Josh today. If he plays within himself and takes the checkdowns, he's nearly impossible to defend. And on top of that's what he was referring to with so much he's missed, is the checkdowns. On top of that, one thing we will start to see unleashed in the playoffs is Josh Allen runs, designed runs. They limit that a lot in the regular season, no more. And this is a Jaguars team that can very much be eaten up by it. I believe Patrick Mahomes had himself a day against them when he was running against them. So that's one area I think that the Bills can attack. Luka, specifically when the Bills have the ball against this Jaguars defense, I want to say, I mean, a lot of people have said this. Dominic said you'll see when the Jaguars stack the box and take away Cook, and that's a prevailing theme. And Roy Collins says they haven't let up a good rusher. What are the Bills going to have success? I have two things I want to say to that. One, yes, the Jaguars are riding an 8-game winning streak, and they have not had a 75-yard rusher all season. The second thing I will say is there's a lot of circumstances that played into their favor. They had a lot of blowout wins during that streak, which again, to their credit, but a lot of those games were games you could kind of see blowouts coming from a mile away. The Titans in week 18 when they had nothing to play for. The Colts when they lose Daniel Jones on the first drive of the game. The Colts when they're starting Phillip Rivers the week after they get mathematically eliminated and have nothing else to play for. The Cardinals starting Jacoby Brissett, which ultimately turned out to be an upgrade over Kyler Murray, but still, that was a Cardinals team that took them to overtime and nearly won the game. And you go down the list, and you really only see a couple of starting caliber quarterbacks there in Bo Nix and Justin Herbert. And that doesn't really lend itself to running the ball when you're getting blown out. Luka, what do you view as the Bills' best option to attack this Jaguars defense?
Do your thing. I genuinely mean that. I think you bring up Josh Allen being unleashed in the sense of now I think the restriction plate of, hey, don't run unless it's absolutely necessary or we give you the okay, that is gone because it's playoff football. You got to do what you got to do. So that is gone. And I also then will say the rush defense has been very good for the Jags, but just like everything else, it feels like this is a context matters discussion when it comes to the Jags. The Jags have been very, very good and deserve to be and looked at the way that they are and be in the place that they are and everything of such. They did everything great that was put in front of them. But you bring up the Cardinals playing them, and it gets pushed to overtime, and it takes the Cardinals kind of going up, choking it away, tying it up, so on and so forth. You got to remember who's in their backfield. Michael Carter, who's a practice squad player, and Bam Knight, who's a barely rosterable player. You look at the remainder of their schedule. Jonathan Taylor you brought up, and Jonathan Taylor's a prime example people bring up. The two games of context matter. It is Daniel Jones getting hurt in the first drive and Riley Leonard with no practice. You obviously understand then what you need to do defensively against that Colts team. And then also on top of it, Phillip Rivers in a game that no longer matters, and he's just out there to have some fun. It is what it is. You look at the other teams. I mean, the Chargers win that they had. They want to run the ball, but I wouldn't say they have any world beaters in the backfield. Houston, they had to play twice. Don't have any world beaters out of the backfield. The only couple times that they came up against big dogs, they did do a good, effective job, but they were still tight games, and those teams kind of just got away from running the ball. If you look at the stats, Seattle would be the only one where they didn't get away from running the ball, still weren't super effective on the ground, but Seattle ended up winning that game in Jacksonville anyways. One, because they're a better team, but then two, it's just the Jags weren't capable of kind of mucking it up as much as the Seahawks needed them to get over the line. So I think just overall, the rush defense is quality, but I would like to sit here and say and tell you, or I want to sit here and say and tell you, I like the Bills' offensive line being probably the best offensive line this defense is going to see all season. And on top of it, James Cook is probably one of, if not the most dynamic running back they would see, especially when it comes to vision in the run game. The only caveat to that, I would say, is Christian McCaffrey week 4. And there was just other issues going on in San Fran all year on why randomly Christian McCaffrey was not as productive on the ground. I just think there's layers to that whole situation. He was also top 10 as a PPR wide receiver in fantasy for what it is worth. So that should paint the picture on what the heck was going on in San Fran or what the issues were. So the overall point of this is, I think the Jags are a very solid team, but where their strengths are that people want to keep leaning on, it's like, I need to see a little bit more out of it to truly believe that it is that great that it wants to be. You have the number one rushing attack going against the number one rushing defense. But when you have the number one rush defense going up against, lackluster rush attack teams such as the Jets, the Broncos, the Texans, the Cardinals, the Titans, the Colts minus a competent quarterback that threatens them. Any of these teams, like the Panthers, week one, the Panthers for what it's worth. So a lot different of a team. The Bengals, the list just goes on and on where it's like, I don't look at these teams and go, yep, they are absolutely able and capable of imposing their will. None of them are capable of imposing their will. They are now going to go up against a side that's absolutely capable of imposing their will. And for what it's worth, they like to put out a team and defense out there that, look, Josh Hines Allen and Walker and Dennis Gardeck, these are guys that I don't look at and go, they are run defend first. They're guys that want to get up the field and get the guy who's taking the snap every play. That is what they believe their primary job is. I would imagine they're being coached to pay attention to the run a little bit more this week, but that is not what their instincts tell them to do more than not. That they've been capable of rushing the passer when they want to because their offense has been capable of getting them big leads early on, especially down the stretch. That I am going to be very curious as to what happens. But if I'm the Bills, I do my bread and butter. I live inside tight ends and inside. I live in that space. I do what I do best. And then from there, you evaluate it at halftime if it's working or not. Obviously, if it's really not working even before then, you will adjust on the fly. But I would like to believe that it's not like this will be a 35-0 game by halftime and they really have to kind of just throw the kitchen sink at things and abandon the ship of whatever their game plan is.
Dominic asked the question. I think everybody's wondering. We'll get to that in a bit, Dominic. But I do want to talk about what Block Oddity said. I've been feeling pressure all week. I don't know why I feel so stressed. This used to be all we dreamed of. Boy, you're right. Like there were so many years, whether it was the year that Orton brought the Bills to 9-7, or if you're old enough, the 04 Bills that lost to the Steelers backups. There's so many years where they came close but didn't get in. You would have prayed for moments like this where you're nervous, and now we're nervous for all the right reasons. This is what you want. Imagine being a fan in Baltimore this week, just wondering, looking at this playoff field as it is, and just wishing you had a chance, and your kicker missed the kick, and now your organization is, turned upside down. All right, I want to get back to an original point, and this is really going to go now when the Jaguars have the ball. And that might have been another Dominic point, but the Jaguars getting Jacoby Myers, and Sean McDermott's mentioned that a couple times this week during his press conference. I feel like he's potentially taken a couple jabs at Bean along the way, and kind of letting people know that he may not be signing off on some of these roster decisions. We know that he voiced his frustration over losing Jamarcus Ingram basically for nothing because of what happened with Darius Slay. And he brought that up again this week with one of the reasons why Maxwell Harrison had to be on the field. We used to have more cornerbacks than we currently do. I see you, Sean. I said this at the outset. If the Bills were to lose this game, the Jaguars are going to be a tough team to stomach losing it to for a lot of reasons, but one of which is, unlike the Bills, they made a move at the deadline for a wide receiver for a very affordable price, and it changed their entire offense. They also had a cornerback injury, with Travis Hunter, and they traded for Greg Newsome, the cornerback. Now, that was more of a salary swap where they got rid of Tyson Campbell, but Greg Newsome has been a good player for them. And so the Jaguars address needs in the offseason. But I think where a lot of fans are also going to look at is, okay, Sean McDermott, this Jaguars team was one of the worst teams in the sport last year. They didn't really add a whole bunch of talent in free agency. They did have a draft where they added Travis Hunter. He's not even here. And they made a coaching change. And now they're one of the best offenses in the sport and one of the best teams in the sport. Look what an impact a coaching change can do, McDermott. And look what an impact adding a wide receiver to the mix can do, Bean. I think for a lot of reasons, Luka, boy, it would be a tough pill to swallow for some folks in Buffalo if this is the team that puts you down.
The McDermott, slides or, comments that's not a new thing either. It feels like those have been weaseled in there a little bit, slipped in once in a while, not in a level of disrespect, but just just so you all are aware, or just so you understand, this is where I stand with this. I recognize the roster for what it is. I recognize the faults maybe at wide receiver and how potentially it would be nicer to have something. And maybe there was even something that he would have liked, but unfortunately for him, Bean did not pull the trigger for whatever it is. I definitely believe that is by design. I think that is absolutely intentional. McDermott is a very calculated individual that anything he says or does has purpose to it. It is not blind. It is not silly. It's not meant for theatrics. He's far from a Rex Ryan type who's just going to throw mud at the wall and hopefully it sticks. Um, I think the point though of seeing the turnaround, and it's absolutely apparent with the Jags, of bringing in a Jacoby Myers, fixing the passing game essentially for them that even Shane Waldron himself couldn't screw up in the second half of the season. It just highlights what that kind of juice and energy can do when you go out there and get what appears to be, and everyone's aware of what's available in a trade market now. If you're a player, bringing someone in that's highlighted as a potential one of the better end pieces that are out there and available, you bring them in, it shows confidence that you want to make that run, and it can do things to your operations that allow people to fall where they need to be and all of a sudden correct things and bring positive results with them. And for their offense, Jacoby Myers, of all people, has been an absolute revelation, has been just an absolute key piece to both him and the passing game being successful, but that's also because Parker Washington, Brian Thomas Jr., who had drop problems left and right in the first half of the season, even kind of correcting ship itself a little bit in his own right, that, yeah, the questions will be there if the Bills lose. It's like, hey, the team that went out there and got the guy that even a lot of people thought would be a good addition for the Bills. We're documented saying we didn't see it nearly as much as others, but the guy himself is over there showing the result as to what that kind of move could have done. And then on top of it all, it's been out there that the Bills were trying to get in on a guy, but you were just unwilling to move this upcoming drafts first rather than a future first. And that will then, did you really care about that first that much that you were willing to swallow a wild card loss to a team who was willing to make that move that was necessary to get them potentially over the hump? It will definitely raise up the flares and questions, and just kind of, I look at it as something that's going to stoke the flames that's already a hotbed of coals existing. It feels like that fire, Josh, is already dormant and waiting. It's just going to take that one ignition, that one little bit of gasoline, or that stoke to the flames to just bellow it up and absolutely just rip terror among Bills fans, the media, and in that house itself, where a loss in this game, I'm not going to say outright will demand for change, but it won't be out of the realm of possible, just for the sake of, you need to see something change. It just feels like this has run its course, and you just need to see if the grass is greener on the elsewhere, because if you don't, you're just now becoming insane, going into a decade-long regime of McDermott just not getting the job done for you, even while you provided him or didn't provide him enough talent to get the job done as well. So GM head coach combo, GM himself just being moved on from, because they're, the fact of the matter is McDermott was the first hire. It wasn't Bean. So there could be something there where McDermott somehow saves his job, but he has a conversation with Pagula and goes, hey, we need a different guy in that GM seat. He's just not getting me the players in the roster that I need to get over the hump. And Pagula just gives him the okay and says, hey, we're going to go out and look for other GMs and opportunities for people to do what you want to do and align with you better, because clearly that communication channel is no longer aligned like it felt like it was for the years past. So a lot of questions will be raised in a loss, and it definitely highlights that Jacoby Myers and a team that was willing to do a move at the trade deadline to fix something that they recognized is there that cost you that win.
Dominic, with your question, I don't love focusing on this week. It feels premature because if the Bills lose, holy cow, we have so much time to get into that, and it just feels like negative juju. But I know a lot of people are wondering. In my opinion, I think the odds of McDermott getting fired, even after a loss, are so remote. You would almost have to say like an obvious coaching blunder took place, like an egregious coaching blunder, or just a situation where McDermott's defense doesn't force a punt all afternoon and Pagula's just tired of watching his defense go out in flames. I do wonder if the conversation around Bean is a little more realistic. I kind of agree with Luka where I think that, if they do start, making you pick a side, I think McDermott has more stroke in that organization. I'm personally more confident in McDermott than Bean. I don't even know if it's particularly close at this point. And unlike McDermott, where you would have to basically lead an entire coaching search and what do you do with your coordinators, the Bills do have a pretty reasonable in-house option in Terrence Gray, who's been up for other GM roles where they could just slide him into position and keep everything else in place and just kind of, you know, kick Brandon Bean to the side if that's what they decide to do. But sitting here right now, I would predict that they're both back just based on really how the hockey team operates. Although, I mean, they have seen a significant boost by letting the GM go. All right, Luka. We didn't really get too much into the X's and O's on the Bills defense against the Jaguars offense. Maybe we can bake some of that into our predictions because we are up against it at the hour mark here. Bills, Jaguars. They have a playoff history against each other. The Bills are 0-2 against this team in the playoffs. Jim Kelly's last game was a playoff loss against the Jaguars. Tyrod Taylor's last game was a playoff loss against the Jaguars.
As a Bill.
As a Bill. Eric Wood's last game was a playoff loss against the Jaguars. All right. The Bills, as of right now, are 1-point favorites. I think that's going to continue to change. Although I will tell you very quickly before we get to predictions, the sharp money is on the Bills right now. It's sneakily on the Bills. When you look at the number of bets, especially on like the point spread, are on Jaguars. When you look at the amount of money, though, the money is pretty even. And that tells you that the bigger bets are coming in on Buffalo. And that's kind of your clue where the sharp money is. My feel on this game, Luka, take like 10 seconds. I know this is kind of your thing. I have a feeling the sharp money is waiting for the public to get this to like a pick 'em or even like a Jags -1. And then they're going to come in on Saturday or Sunday with Bills money line, getting some juice on their side.
It does feel like this is going to be a late sharp action kind of game. And from there, they love nothing more than this media driven kind of bash fest, we'll call it, where it's pumping the Jags, one of the hottest teams in the NFL, this and that, and this and that. And it's like the opposite is the Bills. They have so much pressure, a lot's on their plate, a lot's on Josh Allen's shoulders that they are just praying that the number can get above 60%, whatever it is, and it might force the hand of the books to flip the number, and then maybe you can get Josh Allen to do that. And or if you're just going to straight up bet this one, you want to see it where right now I believe I saw it on one of the books. It's like Bills -112, Jags -108 on the money line. I mean, that's as pick 'em as you can basically get. The only other way it's better is -110 across the board, of course. They want to see that flip so they can just gain a little bit of that edge when it comes to against the books, and it feels like it could potentially happen. But yes, the general sense is you have to look at two things when you're doing it. Where are the number of tickets coming when it comes to the percentages, and then what is the number of dollars hitting each side? And when you see that kind of contrast, when it comes to the number of tickets being on, in this case, it is the Jags, but then all of a sudden you flip that and it is the percentage of money favors the Bills when it comes to that spread. That tells you that the bigger money players are siding with the Bills for the most part. That is the conventional wisdom of it all. And I was talking to someone this week when at one point, I think it was Jags were 57 or 58. So it has come down a little bit public wise tickets on the Jags +1.5. That was like the Monday morning. I think maybe it was Monday afternoon. And he was like, explain that to me like I'm 12 kind of deal. Like, it's like, I don't understand what that means. I was like, I love seeing public money on a Jags team right now, because that tells me that the Jags are the public darling at this moment in time. And let's be honest, these books don't make money by giving away winners. What they do is they try to get the edge. They try to get the public to fail. That is what they want to do. They want to set up the lines to be advantageous to the general fan, but understand that they will be able to profit in the end. So therefore, when you see public money pouring on one side and it is favoring that, this and that, and for the most part, and a pick'em style game, that's where it is. It makes you feel better if you're the opposite, because you know sports books make money by making money, not by giving away winners. So there's that little tidbit I feel like has been the sprinkle on top of my confidence going into this game, that the public has been steady Eddie with just leaning to Jags plus 1.5. And obviously, there's just that, it just like, hey, if you are a true believer, which I am not, we are not in this subscriber book, but if you're a believer in, hey, the fix is in kind of style, you want to see the public money and the public tickets on the opposite side.
Absolutely. All right, Luka, it's time. Playoff prediction time. Bills, Jaguars. Bills under Sean McDermott have yet to win a road playoff game. The Bills are 0-2 in their history against Jacksonville in the playoffs. But the Bills have not made it, or have not failed to make it to at least the second round of the playoffs since 2019, the longest streak in the NFL since the Chiefs are not in this playoff. Something has to give. Luka, what happens on Sunday at 1 p.m.?
Well, I love that you said, hey, let's cake in a little bit of X's and O's conversation about Bills defense versus the Jaguars offense, because I think that's honestly the make or break of this game. I feel as if the strength of the Jaguars is this offense. And in that, though, where they are not strong is what would be the weakness you want to attack with that Bills defense. And that it fits into what the Bills are going to try to do. The Bills always under McDermott are eliminate the big plays, make them grind it out versus you. And obviously this year we saw it where it was leaky, and you would even see that ground game gash this defense in moments. Well, I'm not sitting here quivering in fear of Trevor Etienne. And, their offensive line, for all of intents and purposes, is pretty mid. They have a good tackle. Van Lanen has had a very good year. But outside of him, I think they are very mid. Bretton Strange has been a nice tight end for them, but he's nothing to write home about in my eyes of, when it comes to run blocking and just being an impact player. Like, I would take Jackson Hawes in that blocking world over a Strange any day of the week. So I see that. And then I see, for whatever it is, Rousseau and Bosa have been a very quality edge duo. One of the better pairs that the Bills have had going into a playoffs, and it feels like in a little while. We talked about that earlier. Daquan Jones had a very rough start to this season, but I feel like he's come on a little bit late on. And Dalen Walker is a guy I expect to be a potential game wrecker in this game. He has a matchup that can be exploited. He has the size and capabilities, as we've seen, to kind of blow things up. And from there, Trevor Lawrence is the kind of guy who can get itchy on the trigger finger, who can let pressure and influence truly break him down without it even needing to get home regularly. And when you have someone of the size of Dalen Walker in his face on a regular occurrence, that could be an X factor to pay attention to going forward. And we talked about it. The cherry on top is, hey, their pass game's been great, but our secondary is pretty damn good too. And it's been very stable. And even with Max Harrison out, Christian Benford will be there. Trey White has been better. And then I am just so excited to see Cole Bishop finally in a big game and see what he is capable of, because he can be that chess piece that a McDermott defense can utilize to disguise a lot of things. And that is something that I think Trevor Lawrence still needs to prove to the world. He is capable of understanding what disguise coverages look like and what he can do to execute against them. So overall, I really do think that this is more evenly matched that the general public sees it. And I think the Bills are capable of creating enough confusion that the Jags just are going to be it's going to be a little bit too much for them in this moment that they're not familiar with. Liam Cohen is also very inexperienced when it comes to this. He's an experienced play caller, but he has to manage the entirety and the magnitude of a playoff game now for the first time in his life, and it can be just a little bit too much for him. Whereas McDermott, calm, cool, collected, been here, done it, and I do believe that the Bills will finally get that ever elusive road playoff win for the first time in forever, first time this century. And I will go ahead and say the Bills will win this game, which I think will be a little bit more of a grind fest. And also, for what it's worth, fun fact, I saw it randomly or heard it randomly today at WGR. The Jags in the last 26 years have only one win ever when the point total is 49 or greater. Very random, very weird. Take it for what it is.
Their first game ever. Yeah. That was the one they won.
Yeah, just so random, to be quite honest. But actually, what I think that stat says is when they finally go up against another formidable opponent who can put up points, the Jaguars traditionally, even in recent years under the Trevor Lawrence era and everything like that, they just can't get that last score that's needed in those games, whereas the other team always is. And if you're telling me in the scenario, let's call it for what it is, because the other thing that was said on WGR I think is great for this point, because I'm going to basically make my score off of this. Would you rather Josh Allen, would you rather be on offense or defense when the score line is 28-24 with 3 minutes left and you are the team that's down or up? What do you want to be? If you're up, you're on defense. If you're down, you're on offense. I want to be that team that's on offense, down 4, controlling the outcome of the game. I think it will probably come down to that, and Josh Allen will show everyone why he is Josh Allen. The Bills will be winning this game 31-28. That is what it is. Take it to the bank.
I love it. I'm going to answer that hypothetical after we're done with predictions because I'm on the other side of it. All right. So what a spot, right? So I think so much is going to be taken based off of what happens in this one game. And as we saw with the Steelers and Ravens, so much can happen on something as simple as a missed kick. And it feels like if it comes down to a kick with the situation the Bills have at kicker and with a Jaguars kicker that can kick from the moon, advantage Jaguars. I've been thinking about this a lot. I respect this Jaguars team. I know all the warts on this Bills team. I know their history with Jacksonville, and I do respect this Jaguars team as an up-and-coming team. And I know what it's going to look like if and when the Bills lose this game. Luka, this season for me, personally, has been a season of missed opportunities. After the Bills beat the Patriots, I took a look at the betting lines for MVP because Josh Allen snuck up in there, and I was like, man, I still love Drake May. I don't know if Drake May is going to win it, but I was like, I know the history of this award. They give it to division-winning quarterbacks. Drake May's end-of-season schedule is easy. Stafford is falling behind in his division. I should put something down on Drake May, and I didn't. And now Drake May is right up there with Stafford as like one of the best odds to win it. Early in the offseason, I was all about Dak Prescott is gonna lead the NFL in passing. I should put some money on it. Then they trade away Micah Parsons, and it became like everybody put it on Dak Prescott, thinking that they were gonna, play from behind. So another missed opportunity. I think a third missed opportunity comes up on Monday. Right now, Luka, when you look at Super Bowl odds on FanDuel, the Bills are tied for 6th in the entire NFL at plus 1,000 with the New England Patriots, just a smidge ahead of the Houston Texans. I think on Monday, the Bills are going to be the number 1 team. I think this is a welcome back Buffalo moment. I think this isn't going to say as much about the Bills or as much about the Jaguars as it is about the Bills. I think the Bills are going to, for lack of a better term, enforce their will on this team, have their way with this team, and show that there is a class difference in teams and organizations. I think the Bills are going to win this game somewhat comfortably. 34. I'm going to give this one a score of 34-20, but may not even feel that close. I'm expecting, hoping, for the Bills' best effort we have seen all season. I think they're going to be locked in. I love what they do with Dorian Williams as a delayed rusher. I think that's going to very much help them out with some of the scrambling they've been doing with Trevor Lawrence. And also, I need Sean McDermott to have the coaching advantage in this matchup. He's been in these spots. Liam Cohen, for what I can see, has called offense in one playoff game, and it didn't go great last year with the Bucs against the Commanders. I know things are great in Jacksonville right now. I need this staff that has the pedigree of Sean McDermott, Aaron Cromer, to come in and enforce their will on this team, and it to be a coaching mismatch the way we felt like the Bengals was the other way against the Bills back in 2022, and I feel like it's going to be that way. I do expect James Cook to have a good game. Do I expect him to rush for 120 yards? Probably not, but I think it's going to be one of those games where you never feel like the Jaguars just were an impossible defense to run on, and if they are, it's because they're leaving guys wide open in the passing game. And I do think that the Bills defense is going to have answers for the Jaguars, and I don't think they're a patient enough team just to continue to run Travis Etienne up the middle. So I'm giving the Bills a lot of benefit of the doubt here. I respect the Jaguars, but this is more about belief in the Bills, belief in the program, belief in the culture, belief in what they built. I think come Monday, the biggest story is going to be, holy cow, look at the Bills. Did we just forget about them because they didn't win their division? I give the Bills a comfortable win, and I think it's going to be one of those where the conversation next week isn't going to be about who's fired. It's going to be about who are they playing in the Super Bowl, because, we always go the extreme the other way. All right, your scenario. I would take being up by 4. And I heard this on WGR, and my reason is simple. I think if you're down by 4, you have one shot to win. You score a touchdown. If you're down by 4, you really have 2 shots. And we kind of
sorry.
Yeah, so no, if you're down by 4, if you're up by 4, you have 2 shots. And it's very similar to the 13 seconds game where Bills score and then Tyreek Hill first play houses it. And you're like, God, but we actually are not in a bad spot here. So if you give up the touchdown, unless you just do the worst case scenario of give up the touchdown with 2 seconds left, you should have chance for Josh Allen to go get you into field goal range for Matthew Wright and to kick you into overtime. So that's why I would take that. But I think it's a fascinating conversation. I tweeted out one from our account, the Loop situation, Tyler Loop. Would you take Luka? Now we don't know who the kicker is going to be. So I said you can't know who the kicker is. You just know the Bills kicking situation. Would you take a 43-yard field goal at the buzzer, down by 2, the same exact situation the Ravens faced on Sunday? Right now, would you sign for it with the Bills kicker?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you are controlling the outcome of the game. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's as simple as that.
I think our mutual friend Nino, I think some sharp people on Twitter said even in that scenario, the worst kicker in the league is about 75% to make that kick. You're a 1-point favorite right now, which puts you right around 50%. So if I can boost my odds to 75%, you sign for it all day and say thank you for the 25% odds.
Agreed.
Luka, I'll be back on Sunday afternoon for a halftime show. I am not going to say the thing, but we all know what I want the thing to be. But I will be here no matter how the game's going at halftime. And then one thing I can promise you, win or lose, Luka and I will be back for Bills Chat Podcast, the Jaguars Bills post-game show, breaking it all down. And we're seeing some guys come into chat. Hope you're right. We're seeing Ismailise, our absolute favorite, saying, go Bills. Appreciate you hanging out. She's always in for the halftime show, too. I would recommend hanging out with us. Even if it's frustrating, we can be frustrated together. But Luke and I will be back on Bills Chat Podcast next week and breaking down Monday, where all your podcasts come out. And then next week on Wednesday, we may be back if the Bills have a game to play. So hopefully we're back. Luka, I'm free next Wednesday. Are you?
Yeah, I should be.
All right, Bills, do your thing. And Luka and I have already committed, so now you guys are locked in. Go Bills. It's playoff time. This is what we live for. For Luka, I am Josh McCarty, and we will see you next time, hopefully next week, on Bills Chat Live.